Hello! Welcome to this week's episode of Why Not Both, brought to you by Under the Radar magazine. My name is Pam Shaffer, and I'm a musician and therapist in Los Angeles. And Why Not Both is all about how our multiple passions inform our identity. This week, we got to interview Marissa Nadler, who's an absolutely enchanting musician as well as visual artist. If you like what you hear, you can follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and you can subscribe, of course. And you can also join us on social media. We are at WNB the podcast, and that's on Instagram and on Twitter. And I hope that you love this week's interview. Welcome to Why Not Both. I'm glad to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So the whole conceit of the show is exactly what we were talking about before I hit record, which is doing 1,000,001 things.
Yep.
So I guess my first question for you would be, what do you do? And is there a better question someone could ask you?
Well, that question is always hard when people ask me that, but I am a musician and a fine artist, I guess. And yeah, I mean, it's always hard to answer. I'm kind of terrible at talking about myself, but I'm like surprisingly introverted, I think, for people.
Well, and I think there's a difference between being introverted when you're in your personal space versus if you're performing a song or if you're putting out artwork. Like that's, I don't know if you feel the same way, but I feel almost completely different when it's just like a piece of myself instead of actually just like, oh, here's the whole me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So I'm curious about your fine art because I think most of the people tuning in will probably know you more as a musician.
Yeah. Well, I was predominantly a fine artist earlier in my life and went to the Rhode Island School of Design for a bachelor's and master's degree. Weirdly, I haven't done a lot of like the art publicly until the last few years.
And when you say you didn't do it publicly, were you still practicing fine art more just on your own, or was that something that then the music kind of overtook the time that you would spend making it, or?
Well, one of my odd jobs for the past like decade on and off, not the last few years, but for a good chunk of time, I was teaching fine art at a therapeutic high school.
Oh, wow.
When I was before. Yeah, so I worked with like children and teenagers with, who had been put out of mainstream schools for a variety of reasons. And so I was teaching fine art on and off, but kind of was only doing the art when I had to do a demo or something. I wasn't really treating it seriously. And then like I had a 90-year-old, I did some private painting lessons too, and this 90-year-old woman that was taking lessons from me inspired me to kind of go more seriously back into my pursuits. So now I've, in the past few years, started selling my paintings and kind of went seriously back into it for the first time since college, I think.
Wow. I'm curious because I was like, those are both really interesting populations to work with in context of the arts. And I was curious, like, what specifically about working with her inspired you to then really delve back into making your own art and then selling your art?
Well, she was just so excited to learn something new, which in and of itself I thought was really cool because she was 90, and a lot of people you meet when they're like 40 have already given up.
Right.
And they're on the long road to hell, and they're like, oh, I wish that I knew how to learn an instrument or paint, and they just kind of blame it on talent or something, which is kind of a word I don't really love. So she kept raving about how she was seeing the world in a different way
Oh,
since
wow.
I had started to break it down into like light and color. And she just kind of got to me, and then I started to regret that I hadn't honored my practice more, because
Mm.
very serious little fine artist, and I think I just burnt out kind of for a while.
Mhm.
And now, once music became a job or a career, a little bit more, fine art became more of a relaxing thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, no, I've definitely heard that from other friends who have gone to art school where, like, because of the sheer intensity of it, after a little while, you're like, I'm good for a second.
Yeah,
Like,
especially school. Yeah, it was intense. I just like you go from having an identity based surely around some skill that you've learned, and then you I think maybe people go through little mini identity crises in college trying
yes.
to figure out who they are. And that's when I started to my earliest record was very much almost like a character study and a lot of other people. So
Mm.
looking
Yeah,
back on it, it's murder ballads and stuff like that.
it's
Yeah.
always the weirdest when you look back on something that you made from years ago and suddenly understand it much better. And you're like, oh, that's what that meant.
I
Like,
agree. Yeah. Lately, some lyrics like that I've had in very early records that seemed almost mythological have started to kind of come true in my life. Is I'm not all that new agey really, but almost like premonitions or something.
yes. Like, I find that sometimes I'll write a song that I'm like, well, that made no sense. Or like, oh, I don't know where that came from. And then a few years later, I'm like, oh, there it is. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, yep, yep. And I love what you said about the woman that you were working with, that she saw things from a new perspective, and that I love that attitude because you're right that there's a lot of people who will either say they're too old for
Uh-oh.
something. You okay?
Just like doodling as I talk to you.
I think that's, oh my gosh. I remember I used to get in trouble when I was in school for doodling while I was listening to my teachers, and I kept saying, no, like it helps me listen better.
It's proven that it helps people. Also, I used to get in trouble for the same thing. I wish that I'd like grown up a little bit later where
Mm-hmm.
like people knew more about alternate learning styles.
Yes, as someone with ADHD with inattentive features, which was not diagnosed at all until I was an adult, because I was
Yeah.
not in the least hyperactive. Um, it would have been real nice because that was the other thing I wanted to ask you about was that you ended up working with, you were describing the teenagers you were working with, and I was like wondering what inspired you to work with that population as well.
Um, well, I like preferred working with teenagers than to young kids for some reason, just because I really want to make not like I just really love the seriousness of certain high school artists.
Mm,
It's a fun age that I kind of look back fondly on as an exciting time where you were like I was really excited when I would kind of get good at a specific fine art pursuit.
mhm,
But anyway, these kids were just the job was mostly teaching painting and drawing, like art, ceramics, photography,
mhm,
computer art, like all that stuff. But I think because of I guess, prefer to work with struggling kids because I had like my fair share of emotional issues as a
mm,
teenager. And I didn't really grow up in a generation where that was really that talked about, like being kind of a freak in a normal high school, public
mhm.
school. Yeah. So I think I can just relate to that.
Yes.
Um, yeah.
And I love that you chose to, instead of, I think that some people might either become bitter about that or kind of clam up, but it sounds like you're like, I'd like to give people who are in the same situation an alternative and teach them ways to express themselves. And
Yeah, I loved it. Like I got a few kids in a college art school, which I
hey.
sometimes feel guilty about, but so yeah, it was that thing to do, or I don't know, but yeah, I had a few really special students, and
Oh.
like as my career I had kind of a phase two of my songwriting career, and as it kind of like all these tours took, I stopped working at the job after a few years because
Mm-hmm.
my records kept coming out. And anyway, but it now, like nowadays, I just, even for the kids I taught, I kind of felt like, well, geez, I really got to get back into this and honor the skill that I worked so hard to um, amass in that medium.
Oh, and what do they
Yeah.
think of when they like, do they ever find out about the other side of you? Like, do they ever look up your music?
Yeah, well, I had a few students that like, because I'm so soft spoken and kind of like a little bit of a introverted, shy type, people like some of the kids felt like they were discovering like a secret identity of their teacher when they found me on the internet, because like the photographs, it was just really funny. They're like, oh my God. So it's really fun. Just because it's knowing me as like an art teacher, like I remember going out and buying like kind of like secretarial, like I didn't really know what to wear because I've always been just like this witchy freak.
Uh-huh.
I hadn't had too many like normal day jobs, and like so with like having to get along with the other teachers, and so went and got a bunch of like just it was funny. Like I look back with fondness at that job. So
Oh, I was gonna
yeah,
say, if you're gonna go full on witch, like an art teacher is basically the day job in which you do that. Like,
yeah, it
I
was
was
really fun.
like,
Yeah.
I was like, that is where that is perfect. Though I could imagine it must have been, from what you're saying, almost easier to relate to the kids than to the rest of the staff.
I will say that that's true. I mean, I had two good, like I had a few good, I got along with the French teacher and the science teacher. They were cool, but I didn't click with like all of the teachers just because I don't think I think I get bored really easily.
Mm-hmm.
And if I start to space out and daydream, and I think that can be frustrating for a lot of like good conversationalists or people that are really, you know, focused and respectful. I don't know. I'm just always like I'm working on it. Like I'm trying to focus more on unfinished sentences. I'm always like 8 different places at once, which is the struggle when being a self-employed multimedia artist, for sure. It's like I have like 6 different desks set up, and that helps me
Yes.
station, like
Mm-hmm.
compartmentalize the drawing table where no wet liquids are allowed, then like the messy oil paint table, the
Mm-hmm.
printer, recording studio corner. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And I don't know if this helps you out at all, but I have a different candle for each station that I have set up as well, so that way when I'm doing the activity at that station, I light that candle.
That's a good idea. I like that. Maybe I'm gonna try that.
Thank
That's
you.
yeah. I
Yeah.
used to make candles like a couple of years ago. It was one of my merch things.
Ooh.
But I yeah, I want to get my cauldron down to Tennessee.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, so did you make the candles yourself? Did you work with someone to make the candles?
I made them myself. They're very easy to make. The- Um, all just soy wax or coconut wax or a blend of the two and essential oils.
Ooh.
Um, So I get headaches from chemical fragrances,
Mm-hmm.
and so I like to make the hippie candles, and it's really easy, actually. Very fun project to do with kids or family or whatever.
I was like, that sounds amazing, because I'm much the same way, where artificial scents tend to give me a headache or make my sinuses go on adventures.
Hmm. It's really easy. I got the cauldron from Etsy for like $50, and then you just order like a bag of soy wax and get some mason jars, a hot glue gun, the wicks. I mean, it's an art. You got to like craft projects, but literally once you get the materials, you can make a million candles for free, basically. You never have to buy them again, and they smell better, I think, too.
Yes, and especially the essential oils thing. Like there's a shop in downtown LA that the first time I walked in, I felt like I'd been transported into like some sort of surrealist movie, because it's all just filled with teeny tiny little essential oil jars.
That
Like
sounds wonderful.
thousands of yeah, it's amazing. And so you can like mix your own, like, because I mix my own little oils just to wear.
I think perfume should, some of the chemically ones should be illegal. Like I get so angry on airplanes when it's like the not the essential oil kinds, but the other kinds, the stuff you just
Yes.
the chemically ones
And you're
at
trapped.
airport. It's just it's too much. So Christmas season's a little tough, I think.
Oh.
I'm not a fan of this time of year, so like took me a while to wake my brain up this morning.
Oh, I know this vibe. My brain is like, is it the holidays yet? It's the solstice, right? And I'm like, yes, I know, brain. I know. And I love that, like, even just talking to you about making candles, I was thinking about in the back of my mind that when we think of musicians, especially people who are not musicians themselves, it's almost like all of the questions that you read in interviews are almost all about the music or what hardships made the music happen, as opposed to like all
Hmm.
the other stuff that goes on in people's lives. That you're like, well, what about all that other cool stuff?
Yeah, I agree. Like I like the premise of the podcast because a lot of DIY musicians like myself are kind of really inspiring entrepreneurs or industrious craftspeople. And it takes a lot of self-discipline to kind of be able to make enough to live off of as a employed full-time musician. And a
Yes.
lot of people I think do like kind of like blame it on luck or talent, but I think it's that those work ethics that
Yes.
people, like the workaholics, that just kind of like to work. That will, when you like what you do, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling, but you know what I mean.
Well, and also I like talking to you about things both within music and outside of music, because I think some people also have shame about working outside of music, because in some ways, like, music will sometimes pay you and pay you well, and sometimes it doesn't. Um,
Hmm.
and I had been thinking a lot about, like the times that it doesn't, like, why feel ashamed if you make money doing something else?
Yeah, well, especially the whole thing with one of the reasons that I got back into painting was like I put up all these oil painting atmospheric landscapes, many of which have since like replaced with other paintings, but and they all sold like all these oil paintings within
Mm-hmm.
an. And I was like, wow, I never thought imagine making money as a painter. I mean, so
Oh.
it's just the way it is. Like I kind of had resigned myself to other motivators other
Mm.
than money from a very early age, just because in my generation or when I was a kid, you heard from your teachers and family sometimes, you can't make money as an artist, or like good luck with that. my par-
Right.
my parents happen to be very supportive, and so I'm very lucky, but um still, I think they worry even now that both of their kids went into the arts. My brother is a writer, like a novelist, and yeah.
Are your parents in creative fields at all, or are they just like, well, this is awesome that we made kids who are, but like we're not in creative fields ourselves?
Kind of, yeah. My dad is a dentist, which I think is a kind of creative field because it's
Yes.
very hands-on and you have to like make all these molds. Like, but my mother
Yes.
is an abstract painter
Ooh.
and witchy woman, all around artist type. So they're kind of like yin and yang. And I think I get a lot of like the OCD from my dad and like just that attention to detail that like I think dentistry requires.
Yes.
God, I mean, I feel terrible for that sometimes, but yeah. Anyway,
I
yeah.
cannot imagine, honestly, like, one, thinking about the artistry of dentistry, I'm just like, yes, because especially if you're like helping craft, I mean, how people look, how people feel, like everyone pays attention to what your smile looks like.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, that makes sense. But also, I empathize with, imagine how stressful it is to have to like put your hand in people's mouths all the time.
Yeah. Oh God. Like I
I
could
was
never do it. I mean, I guess you just get used to it, but ugh,
I was like,
I think
that's
it's a very tough job. It's not like I think people have misconceptions about those types of jobs, but they're kind of like physical. You're
yes.
like
I was like,
scraping people's mouths, like more. Yeah.
it's like super intimate because I think about like how intimate it is to share a piece of art or a song with someone, but like your dad's literally reaching in people's mouths. I'm like, that's
Yeah. I mean, he's still like the, yeah. I think I can't wait for him to get to retire.
Aw.
Um, yeah. So
Did you ever
yeah.
practice art with your mom? Like, because that's cool to see, a parent be an example of like, hey, I do abstract art. And like, I guess I don't come from an artistic family, though both of my parents are wonderful. They're both retired DAs. And so when I
Oh
came to
wow.
doing music and therapy, they were like, we love you, but we're very confused.
Hmm.
So I was wondering, I was like, what's that like to have a parent who's an artist?
It's great. I mean, she taught me how to paint, so she was very fun to have as a mother because it was like kind of like growing up with your sister sometimes, but
Oh.
she's very, very different. And so I just saw the world a lot differently because of her. So um yeah, we paint together sometimes, or like she's definitely like apple didn't fall far from the tree there kind of thing. Um yeah.
That's because I thought about what you said when you just now when you said that how it, like informed how you saw the world, and then the 90-year-old woman that you worked with that all of a sudden she's like, oh, I'm seeing the world in a different way. I was like, oh, that's so cool that we can kind of provide lenses for each other to see the world.
It really was. It kind of reverberated with me because of so many young people I know are like so tuned out. And that's kind of my pet peeve that with I hate laziness in people. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the thing that drives me crazy the most, but I do envy people that know how to relax.
Yes. I just got a book and I haven't read it yet because it's one of my holiday break reading books, but it's called How to Do Nothing. And I was fascinated by it because of the title, because I realized I was like, I'm not certain how to do nothing. Like there are certain moments where I think I feel slightly nothingness, like whether
Mhm.
it's like relaxing in like the pink salt sauna at the spa, or like whether it's after a particularly difficult hike and I'm kind of at the top of the hill just being like, do I remember how to breathe? Apparently I only do nothing when I'm very warm. But
Mhm.
maybe I need to practice like doing nothing at a normal body temperature. I was like, I'm unsure of this. I should buy a book and read about
Yeah, I don't know how to do nothing either.
it. Apparently my only life tips on that are like, get really warm.
You can't really get warm where well, you're in LA, right? Yeah, it's different
Yeah.
here.
And you said you're in Tennessee?
Right now, I'm in Nashville.
Oh, what's it like in Nashville? I've actually never been to Nashville.
I don't really know yet. I just kind of just got here.
Oh, that's cool.
hmm Long story, but just seeing if I like it. But I was living in Massachusetts forever.
Also not a warm place.
No, I love winter. In fact, I really miss the snow, like
Mm.
the big snow and the big ice. Like I like LA a lot, but I don't know if I could deal without having seasons. Um, yeah.
You mean you don't love the mudslide season or the fire season or
No, I think I like the autumn foliage season and the blizzards and stuff. Yeah,
our wonderful array of minor natural disaster seasons?
I know. I guess those are seasons. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm like, I guess being an LA native, it snowed here exactly once. And I remember it because my mom woke us up in the middle of the night so we could see the snow, and then it stuck the next day and it was on the water slide on my parents' pool, and I just thought that that was the funniest thing that ever happened.
Yeah. Wow. Just one time. That's
The one,
crazy.
the one snow.
Oh,
Yeah,
that is pretty.
it was really pretty. It looked like everything looked enchanted. Like I was like, now I mean, I don't think I fully get it, but I did get kind of what the calmness is of like a fresh snow.
Oh, it's so pretty. Yeah, the way the light hits it.
Hmm.
Um, there's no detail on anything. Like all the pain vanishes or something.
It just looks so, it looked almost, I remember it looked almost like bluish white. Like I was like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
Like, do you think that being in different environments influences like the music you make or the art that you end up making?
for sure. Yeah, I do.
'Cause I
Yeah,
was
I
like,
mean, I think I make very like wintry or autumnal music because it's
mm,
most of the time cold where I wrote all my records, I think,
mm.
so far.
Do you find that there's a time of year that you end up writing more, or?
Winter, that's I think why I have so many records. It's people in warm climates, it's like it's much easier to stay inside all day when it's freezing out and hurts to go outside.
I mean, I do agree with that. It's rare that I'm very spoiled in LA. I am that Californian that like it drops below 70 and I'm like, "Oh no, it's time to bust out my coat."
I know. I was in Portugal. It's very warm there too recently for a concert, and it was like literally 60 degrees out, and like they were all like, "Aren't you cold?" And it was like winter in Portugal, 60 degrees. I was like, "No, I think it's really warm out actually." And people had hats and scarves on, and I was really confused because like 50 degrees even, it's like really warm to me. I think people this Boston got to me.
That's so funny because I remember the first time I went to Boston, I was trying to like really put on a brave face, but like I kind of couldn't feel like my face, my hands. Like at one point,
Yeah.
I think I just gave up on like trying to pretend that I wasn't freezing, and I hid in my friend's armpit at a bus stop. I was like, it looks like it's warm under there, and I'm very short. Can I just
Oh, yeah,
stick
it
my
gets
face in
really,
there?
really, really cold there. But I like it. I mean,
I
Tennessee
think,
is a little bit warmer and there's like mini seasons. So,
yeah. I think I like, there's an Icelandic word for, and I cannot remember what it is. It literally means window weather, where it's like weather that looks beautiful when you're inside. And it sounds like that's like
oh,
the inspirational,
I wonder what that is. That would be a good name for a record.
right?
I'm gonna write that down.
I feel like it's in my text thread with one of my friends. Let me look it up. Glugaveder.
Okay. Well, that's not that pretty, unfortunately. I don't know if I'd name a record that, but it's a cool
Sadly,
word.
no. Icelandic is one of those really fantastic languages where the cadence of the sentences is so beautiful. And then occasionally you say like one of the words, and I think it's probably just because I have an American accent, but when I say one of the words, it just sounds like syllables all crashing into each other.
Yeah.
Sounds like a car wreck of sounds. Whereas when you actually hear someone speaking it fluently, you're like, oh, that's so lyrical and lovely. That's interesting. I was thinking about when you were saying that you were writing when you were inside and that you didn't want to like go outside because it's quite wintry. But do you also produce your own records? Like when you're writing, are you thinking of the production work as well? Do you work with other collaborators? Like what's kind of your process like with that?
It really depends on the project. For my solo work, I do think about the production and early on, and I demo songs like on a computer, like after I write them on a computer, where I will then write harmonies and fool around with instrumentation. So my demos actually sound like releasable, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I'll go into a studio to get better fidelity
Right.
or different players. With the ideas and some of the melodies already written for instrumentation parts. With collab, I'm not, I write alone, but I've
Mm.
done some sonic collaborations, like the Droneflower project with my friend Steve Brodsky is like a Sacred Bones put it out, but it's got some covers and it's got a more ambient sound.
That sounds really fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it sounds like in some ways both of the pursuits that you have are like really calmingly solitary.
Sometimes it's calming, yeah. Sometimes it's really maddening, and I wish, you know, it is what it is. Like, there's good days, bad days at work where you're frustrated and you feel like everything you're making is ugly or sounds terrible, but that's part of art making, is to the perseverance to just keep
Yes.
making it and letting it go.
Well, and I find that I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes I'll work on something and think that it's terrible or genius. Like really either way. I don't think when I'm working on something I'm ever like, well, this is medium okay. Um, but then it's only if I leave it for a day or two, so it's almost like I come back and pretend to be a new person. Or maybe I am because it's a day or two later. That then I can hear it, not more objectively, but I can hear it through new ears and be like, oh, I know where that's supposed to go. Or like, oh, I can shift this around. Like, it's almost like I have to leave it alone for a while.
Yeah, I think stepping away from art is a very good practice to have to gain some clarity, this distance.
Yes. What I was curious what inspired you to start working on music when you were kind of stepping away from fine art for a bit.
Well, I actually had started writing and playing music um, when I was about 14.
Mm-hmm.
So they were concurrent practices, though. I took fine art more seriously. I'd always wanted to be a painter. Um,
Oh.
like, but then I just got really into songwriting as well. It became like an addiction, or I
Mm-hmm.
really just really enjoyed it. And so that kind of hit me by surprise. It hit a few people, like my family too. I don't think anybody expected me to become a musician,
Mm-hmm.
especially with my personality type. Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because I'm not sure what musicians you socialized with, but I found that most of my friends who play music, like I would say that though I'm introverted, I love one-on-one conversation. And so like I come across as way more outgoing if you meet me one-on-one, whereas in a group I'll clam up. But I would say that most of the musicians I know are actually quite introverted.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
you're right. It's just a weird, yeah,
It's
thing.
a weird dichotomy. Like I think of one of my good friends who same thing one-on-one. I mean, she's extraordinarily charming, but on stage, it's like I love watching her on stage because it's like all of a sudden she taps into something else, like something that's outside of, kind of an everyday interaction with her that like I never see it except for when she's performing. I'm like, whoa. Like, then
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, it's a good way to put it. Tapping into something else.
yeah, like, because I'm not sure, it's funny, I get extraordinarily nervous before I perform, and I was like, I don't know if you feel the same way. Like, how do you feel when you're performing?
When after the first song or two, once I start to like lock in with the groove and the audience, I enjoy it. But I'm usually nervous, like leading up to a concert and through the first song, like
Yeah. Yeah.
still, no matter what. Yeah. And then
I-
I'm like, oh, then I find it enjoyable once I'm actually playing. If it sounds good on stage, it's a big plus. If people are really into it, it's a big plus because it's like the energy thing.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I feel similarly, where once I realize that I've opened my mouth and started playing an instrument and have not, in fact, died, that maybe things will go okay. And then it's like an on-ramp, and then you're like, oh, okay, now we're here. Okay. I love that you said that you didn't expect to be a musician because in some ways it's like it's almost the reverse of the usual story of like, oh, well, I had to make money in another way and then like my music made money, but it's almost like your music made you a living and then you got to discover like, oh, my painting actually can make me money as well.
Yeah, it was like a plus because I was doing all these stupid things. Like, I mean, not that make candle making that is totally cool, but I mean, I went to like I was just like, I don't know why I wasn't thinking of the most obvious thing. I was thinking about all these stupid things, like the like more when I really was the most obvious thing I was the best at, other than music, was like painting and drawing, and it just
Hmm.
I don't know why I was so. Um, I think of just fear of failure can be very powerful.
Yes.
Like I was like more, yeah. I think just fear of putting something out there. Yeah,
Yeah, because it's like it sounds almost like if you did put paintings out there and they didn't sell, that would be very painful. And so you're like, I'm not gonna do that. Like,
yeah. It can be like one of the biggest things for a lot of people. A reason why people don't do something, or like they'll work on records and never release them, and so just keep
mm-hmm.
on working on them forever. Stuff like that is it's like resistance. There's a book called The Art of Resistance, I think, that's
Ooh,
a lot about like breaking down the little devices that we set up to um, block our creative progress. But anyway, yeah, just
now
gotta
I
plow
wanna
through it.
now I wanna add that to my reading list. I was like, now I can learn about breaking through resistance as well as doing nothing, which I think like both are probably pretty valuable skills.
Yeah, that's funny. They're opposite books. Resistance.
God, I want to look that up. And I'll have to ask my friend Magnus if there's any other very graceful words to describe winter weather, because somehow I have the feeling that Icelandic has more than just one word for that.
I hope so.
I don't know. I love how language informs like what's important in a culture too. Like I think about that sometimes about how we use our words and images and how specific they are to like where we're from.
Yeah, totally.
I was wondering when you did your own art, do you ever do art like for other people or inspired by other people's work, like for album art or things like that?
Well, I did my no. I mean, I did my last album cover, but I've been working on some commissioned paintings, so that's for other people. But generally, like, um, I want to stay. I want to get gallery representation, I think, and try to
Nice.
keep it like not Yeah, I was an illustration major, but I think I identify more as like a painter. There's a difference, I think, between the two of them that I didn't know when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like illustrations sometimes like are not left up to the imagination.
I was
But
gonna
anyway,
say,
I think
go on.
oh, sorry, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I want to let you finish your thought because my mind immediately went, oh wow, like there's a lot of different things to navigate within the music industry and within the art industry that in some ways are parallel, but also are their own like little galaxies, and that you'd have to learn how to kind of like navigate both of them.
Yeah, it's I feel like there isn't enough time in the day sometimes for all the things I want to do or enough energy to do it. So that's the one trick about balancing the medium war or something.
Yeah, because I mean, it's funny because the podcast is like, why not both? And sometimes I think like one of the only reasons why not to do both is like there's only one you. And so it's like after a while, like time and energy are in a way infinite but also finite because they're contained with one person.
Yeah, exactly. So you just have to I do prioritize. So I try not to take on too many things. Like I started to become an animation person. And I said, Marissa, you're never going to have enough time to really get good at this. So I kind of stopped doing claymation animation for a while just because
Hmm.
taking up too much away from my music, stuff like
Got
that.
it. Well, and claymation animation that's intense because like each frame you have to manipulate the physical objects.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
exactly.
I feel like people, well, I guess it's interesting, like working in like music production or claymation production. It's like once you're actually kind of on the ground working and you see the details that go into each of those, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's a beautiful art form.
It really is. When you did your album art, was it something that you'd made prior, or was it something that was inspired by the album?
The latter,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, kind of just decided to finally paint my album cover after, but I think it was just a stormy record, so I didn't want to put another photo on it.
Yeah, I was curious about that. Like in the past, when you'd worked on your album art, did you collaborate with others or did you design the art?
I usually like had a part in it, whether it was the graphic design or the choice of the photo or yeah, I always had a bit of a part in the design, but
Mm-hmm.
never yeah.
Got it. I was wondering, I was like, what do you think is the most challenging part of balancing those two? Like, it sounds like time is definitely a big challenge. But I was like, are there
Yeah, time and focus.
time and focus? Do you ever kind of like, I don't know if this happens to you, but if I'm working on a project and I either start losing focus or interest, like I kind of bounce to another project. It almost sounds like with your stations, you could kind of like bounce to different ones.
Yeah, exactly. I just try to get up every couple hours or try not to work on one thing too long. So
Mm-hmm.
then it starts to lose its zest, I think. Whether it's like a song or something else.
Well, and does it ever happen to you that you're working on something in one medium, but then it inspires you to like move to the other?
Yeah, definitely.
I love that feeling. I was struck when you said that you weren't sure if it was a good thing to help your students get into art school, and so I was wondering, like, what would you advise for someone who is starting on that path?
Be prepared for a lot of hard work and like I mean, yeah, it's just not for everybody, but if you really like what you do, you don't need a lot of other things. Um, I
Mm.
mean, I've had more success than like than other people that I know in the music stuff, and but it's still like no matter where you are on the hierarchy or whatever, there's always somebody doing better, or
Mm-hmm.
and it's just about finding your purpose from within so that your choice of artistic career isn't a soul crushing,
Yes.
like it can be.
Well, yeah, if you're looking, it sounds like if you're looking just for like external signs that you're doing a good job, it's kind of like sometimes you're going to get those and sometimes you're going to get the opposite. So
Exactly.
having like an internal compass. I don't know if you find it valuable, but I also have several friends that if I'm working on something, I can show it to them, like, and I trust them with their judgment that like they have my best interest in mind.
Yeah.
What would you recommend for fellow musicians who are getting into music now? Because the music world is so strange right now.
Oh, I have no idea. Well, just not to do it because you want to be a rock star. Like, you
Right.
just really have to enjoy writing music and enjoy the process because the rewards are not like that often. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just about, yeah, you can't do things for the product.
Gotcha. I like that to kind of like focus on the process. So if you enjoy the
Hmm.
process, do it.
Hmm.
Oh, thank you for joining us on Why Not Both?
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Why Not Both. You can like and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform, and you can also find us on social media under WNB the podcast, and that's on Instagram and on Twitter. Thank you again for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.